Welcome in. Tonight, we're bringing you a special in the courts. In the next 30 minutes, we'll examine the pros and cons of legalizing marijuana in Maryland and discuss where does all the tax money go? Does it lead to more or less crime? And what will legalizing it do for those charged with marijuana possession? Don't move. It all starts right now. I'm Katie Barlow, and thanks for being here for this special In the Courts episode. We start with President Joe Biden's announcement in early October. He pardoned thousands of people who had been convicted of marijuana possession under federal law. He urged governors to follow suit for those convicted of similar state charges. Biden also says his administration will look into whether marijuana should continue to be a Schedule I drug like heroin and ecstasy.
As I said when I ran for president, no one should be in jail just for using or possessing marijuana. It's already legal in many states, and criminal records for marijuana possession have led to needless barriers to employment, to housing, to educational opportunities. And that's before you address the racial disparities around who suffers the consequences. While white and black and brown people use marijuana at similar rates, black and brown people are arrested, prosecuted, and convicted at disproportionately higher rates.
Maryland's current and outgoing Governor Larry Hogan has not weighed in on Biden's move, but the candidates running to replace him both have a stance on the issue. Democratic candidate Wes Moore says he's all for legalization. His opponent, Republican Dan Cox, says he's against it. So what is Maryland voting on exactly? Well, on November 8th, Maryland voters will decide whether to legalize recreational marijuana. On the ballot, the question will read, do you favor the legalization of the use of cannabis by an individual who's at least 21 years of age on or after July 1st, 2023 in the state of Maryland? If it passes, the law would actually amend the Maryland Constitution, adding an article, Article 20, allowing Marylanders to possess up to 1.5 ounces of marijuana beginning July 1, 2023. It'll also direct state legislators to pass necessary laws governing the use, distribution, possession, regulation, and taxation of cannabis. Legalization will also have an impact in the courts. Anyone with a prior conviction of possession that would be legal under the new law will have their conviction expunged automatically. And anyone serving time right now for possession will be able to apply for resentencing. Experts say that's good news, especially for African Americans who have been arrested and convicted of possession in greater numbers than other races. And we'll have more on that coming up. So how do Maryland voters feel about legalizing marijuana in their state? Well, right now, it looks like they're in favor of it. An average of recent polls shows Marylanders will vote to legalize pot by a nearly 2-to-1 margin. A Washington Post University of Maryland poll in September found 73% of Maryland voters in favor of legalizing recreational marijuana for adults over the age of 21. And based on that poll, there's support across age, partisan preference, region, race, and education levels. But even with all of that support, there's still opposition in Maryland. Critics like Dr. Christine Miller, a neuroscientist and Towson resident, says there's not enough focus on the mental health effects of marijuana use. Although the law legalizes possession for adults who are over the age of 21, the Centers for Disease Control actually cites numerous negative effects of teen marijuana use, including problems with memory and learning and an increased risk of mental health issues. In fact, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who is pro-legalization, by the way, recently said that he worries students ask him about legalization so often during his public appearances. He says he's not a great fan of drugs and alcohol, but he still supports legalization. For adults, the CDC says marijuana use especially frequently, which is daily or nearly daily, and in high doses, can cause disorientation and sometimes unpleasant thoughts or feelings of anxiety and paranoia. So if Maryland legalizes, they'll actually be the last in our region to do so. D.C. legalized possession of up to 2 ounces of marijuana back in 2015. And it's still illegal to sell recreational weed, but you can transfer it to someone else so long as there's no payment made or any other type of exchange for goods or services. Now, this led to the so-called gifting businesses in the district. You buy a piece of art, for example, and you get your pot as a thank you gift for your purchase. Now, D.C. announced a joint cannabis task force. I kid you not, that is the name of it. And they were supposed to start cracking down on the gifting businesses by running inspections for compliance with D.C. regulations on food safety, fire code, registration with the tax office. The status of that task force currently up in the air. Now, across the river in Virginia, the Commonwealth legalized possession of 1 ounce last year. If you get caught with more than that, you get a fine, unless you're intending to sell or distribute it, which is still against the law. But the Youngkin administration actually made efforts to recriminalize possession of smaller amounts earlier this year. His proposed amendment would have made possession of 2 ounces a misdemeanor, punishable by 6 months in jail, up to a $1,000 fine. Higher penalties if you got caught with more, but the proposal actually got pushback in the state Senate.
But a handful of people that didn't include a single member of the Legislative Black Caucus deciding new criminal penalties going forward with no real opportunity for public input is concerning to add criminal penalties. And I hope that that is not a process we choose to use in the future.
Governor Youngkin's amendment failed when the Senate didn't advance the bill. So, well, President Biden's announcement only affects those who have been convicted of simple possession. It doesn't change the fact that it's still illegal under federal law. Since 1970, cannabis has been classified as a Schedule I drug under the Controlled Substances Act. Same as heroin, same as ecstasy. Schedule I drugs, they're defined as having, quote, a high potential for abuse and no currently accepted medical use in treatment and, quote, a lack of accepted safety for use under medical supervision. In his recent announcement, Biden said that his administration would take a look at whether cannabis should continue to be considered a Schedule I drug. But for now, it is, until Congress does something about it.
It is time to end the federal prohibition on cannabis. And this bill provides the best framework for updating our cannabis laws and reversing decades of harm inflicted by the war on drugs.
In July, Schumer introduced major legislation that would repeal federal prohibitions on marijuana. The bill included Democratic and Republican priorities, from expunging weed-related records, similar to what Maryland is considering, to law enforcement funding to combat illegal cannabis-related activity. And it also looks like there's a bipartisan support for legalization. The Brookings Institute recently clocked congressional primary candidates, their cannabis positions, by party. Now, there's support from both sides of the political aisle here, although there's stronger support on the left. The question going into next Congress is whether legalization will be a priority for lawmakers, no matter who takes the majority. Coming up, we'll talk with a former Baltimore Raven about legalization right here in Maryland. Don't go away.